Well, thank you everybody for being here. This is our first shot at a faculty roundtable, so we're really excited to be doing this, and it's something that we've talked about for a little while. So yeah, thanks for being here and being a part of it. Our topic today is going to be integrating community engagement into your promotion and tenure materials. And I thought we could just start by going around, and if everybody could just share their name, their college department, and got a lot to cover in a short time. So if you teach a class or you're engaged in community engaged research, just quickly mention what that is, and then we'll get rolling on the discussion. Yeah, let's start with our folks on Zoom. Jeff Sheen.
Hey everyone, I'm JC Sheen. I am in the Department of Social Work. Thanks, Kate, for choosing me.
No. I'll have to say something quickly, but
Pardon, Collins. Oh, Ed Stafford. Oh, you're still muted. There you
Is
go.
that better? Am I muted now?
Nope.
I'm now unmuted. Okay, thank you. Ed Stafford, I'm part of the marketing strategy department, and I co-lead the Utah High School Clean Air Marketing Contest. And we've already got about 500 kids up and running in the contest for this year already. I've been at Granger twice this past week in West Valley City, and also Fast Forward in North Logan.
Okay, Jessica.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Shaw. I'm in the Sociology and Anthropology department. I guess the focus of community engaged research that I tend to do is looking at local perceptions of different environmental issues so that that can be used in planning according to local needs.
And Katie.
I'm Katie Krause. I'm in nutrition, dietetics, and food science, and I teach a community engaged course. It's our senior dietetic practicum course where the students do capstone projects where they're working in a variety of community settings.
Jake.
I'm in the Department of Landscape Architecture, Environmental Planning, and I teach some courses where our studios engage design challenges in local communities here in the state.
Tim Riley.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Tim Riley, and I'm the Curator of Archaeology and Director down here in Price, Utah, of the Prehistoric Museum. And I don't really teach a community engaged course, but a lot of my work is involved in community outreach and engagement through public education at the museum and out at rock art sites and things like that.
Sam.
Sam I am. I'm in Blanding campus, and I just joined. What do you want to know?
Just your name, what department you're with, and maybe a course that you teach or some research you're involved with.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I teach 5 courses: Introduction to Criminal Justice, then Juvenile Justice, Child Abuse, Sociology, Juvenile Delinquency, and Juvenile Law. And so last year I made a decision to switch all my classes to become community engaged course. So we did the first semester, and then in the process of revising it so that it will be permanently designated as a community engaged course. So this is exciting for me because I am fully invested in how to improve my activities in the class. So that's really. It's also an important part of my research. I have a secondary appointment as an extension specialist for prevention science, and we want to leverage community engagement to serve all 29 counties. So that's why I'm here.
Great. Thanks. Sunshine.
Hi guys, I'm Sunshine Bursey. I'm in the College of Natural Resources and Wildland Resources, and I teach quite a few community engaged courses, including one that's in like a senior course in wildlife ecology, where we do work with BLM and DWR on critical pronghorn habitat. And I'm in Price, Utah.
Kirsten.
Hi, I'm joining you all from the car on my way to my daughter's dance class. So hopefully you can hear me, but I don't do community engaged teaching, but my research to date has involved a decent amount of community engaged research in partnership with tribes and tribal governments and indigenous communities. That's why I'm here.
And Robbie.
Hi, I'm Ravi Gupta. I'm department head for. I'm department head for history, religious studies, and classics, and I'm here primarily to learn more about supporting faculty who are doing community engaged learning and scholarship in my department, and also the CEL designation. So really trying to see what I can do in terms of both encouraging my faculty to think about the opportunities here, and also to support those who are doing that work through the tenure and/or promotion process. So that's kind of what drew me here, and Jess Lucero from social work told me about this. So thank you, Jess.
Great. And Abiodun? She put something in the chat. Yeah, that she was really mobile for a little while. So she. Okay. Abiodun is a whoops. Assistant professor in nutrition, dietetics, food science, developing a new project on community resources, use and access. Great. All right, Jess.
All right. Hi, everyone. Jess Lucero, department head in social work and the chair of the community engagement advisory group, faculty advisory group here at USU.
Larry Smith, provost.
Michael Otteson. I'm in the philosophy department and common studies department. I teach social ethics, which is all about practical ethical questions. We think a lot about every semester. My friends, some of my friends, they agree to go with my class's recommendation for where to donate a certain amount of money in terms of what to do with it. So, you know, just as a matter of community engagement and civic responsibility, I guess that fits under that umbrella.
I'm Mike Ashfield. I'm also a philosopher in concepts of philosophy. And I'm not doing anything right now that's that could be called community engaged learning. But when I was a grad student at USC, I wrote curriculum for the Joint Educational Project, which was their kind of, they house all their, I guess, CEL under this project, and they sort of, they run it as a kind of separate unit, and then professors can sign up courses to, and so they have this sort of dedicated staff that run those sorts of programs with, they run legal clinics for immigrants, they run like health clinic volunteering, lots of interesting sort of community involvement that students can get credit for doing. So I'm excited to try doing something like that here, but I haven't tried yet. And I teach a lot of ethics courses as well.
I'm Aaron Arredondo, assistant professor in sociology anthropology department. So I do community-based participatory research with migrant populations. And some topics include how they experience place and belonging across diversifying community and organizational contexts. So yeah, so I'm here to figure out how we can emphasize the value of community-based research when it comes to moving along from in the tenure track. So.
My name is Carlos Licon. I'm in the Landscape Architecture and Environmental Planning program. I'm involved in studios and courses that our department is defined by doing a lot of applied projects with community stakeholders. So we provide a lot of assistance, and they provide it with great challenges and cases for our design and planning studios. So we work a lot with community stakeholders and CD and officials and agencies.
I'm Dave Anderson. I'm also in landscape architecture and environmental planning. So everything that Carlos said applies to me as well.
I'm Justin Finley, and I'm head of sociology and anthropology. And like Robbie, I'm here to help learn more about how I can support faculty, both in the classroom, but in their research and tenure and promotion materials. Right now, I'm working on a community-led archaeology program in Vernal. It's just finally starting to take roots. So.
I'm Nelda Alderson, and I'm the Assistant Director for Community Engaged Learning in the Center for Community Engagement.
And I'm Kate Stevens. I'm the Director of the Center for Community Engagement for the Logan campus. All right, so we're lucky to have Larry Smith with us here today, our provost, and we asked if he could just get the conversation going and talk to folks about some of the recent changes that were made to code to include community engagement language. So
yeah, thanks, Kate.
Take it away.
Thank you for inviting me to be part of this group. What I'd like to do over the course of the next 45 minutes. Oh, I'm sorry, I just want to get a rise as a kid. Anyway, yeah, let me kind of back up to several years ago when some very idealistic folks like Kate and Jess came into the provost's office and made a pitch that it was about time that Utah State University be officially recognized as a university that conducts very valuable, meaningful kinds of community engagement. And, you know, USU has always been involved in communities. I mean, right off the bat, you think about our land grant mission, you think about extension, and that's what extension does for a living, right? Is to have positive impacts on communities in their particular realm. However, you know, once you take your next breath, you suddenly realize that countless faculty across the entire academic enterprise are doing all kinds of amazing things to be engaged in their communities, to create impactful experiences for students, you know, and to show leadership and help students understand the value of engaging in communities and serving them. So the journey toward official legitimacy of USU's community engagement started, I guess, the first time I was provost, maybe around 2016 or so. And I was honored to be part of a steering committee, I guess you'd call it, and trying to outline the application that USU was going to make to Carnegie. And as time went by, folks like Kate and Jess and Nelda did the heavy lifting, and others, I want to make sure we give credit where credit is due, did the heavy lifting of structuring the application to Carnegie. And there were a lot of pieces to it, a lot of pieces, you know, such as, it wasn't just making a list of the kinds of things we do, but we had to assure Carnegie that we had a rock solid tracking process that we were taking steps to create course designations, official course designations, and also that we would add clarity in our faculty policies and other faculty documentation about the worth and value of doing community engaged work or community engaged learning with students and in every aspect of your professional responsibility as a faculty member. And so I then I had left the provost's office and in the meantime then that happened. Provost Frank Gailey, I guess, worked with the steering committee and the folks involved in the Carnegie application and worked through the faculty senate process to insert language into both the faculty code, section 405 of faculty code, insert language that made it crystal clear that if you chose, you're not required to, but if you chose to do, to make effort in the realm of community engaged learning, it would matter. It would count in your tenure and promotion materials. And so when you look in section 405.2, I was going to say 0.1 parenthesis 2, but I'll just say 405.2. You see that in 4 sections, the teaching section, the research section, the extension and service sections, all 4 of those have language that say specifically that if you want to do this, it will count toward your tenure and promotion. So that was kind of a big leap for Utah State, I believe, on the faculty side of this. In addition, there was also language inserted into the USU faculty role statement, and it kind of added additional information in the extension faculty section. But again, there's language in all the major sections that reflect faculty responsibilities, teaching, research, and service that makes it clear that you will get credit and it will carry tenure and promotion weight if you choose to do this. And so I'm here to make sure you understand that kind of effort is taken seriously. It will be taken seriously. It will count. The days of the perceptions that maybe this is just, bells and whistles and fluff or an add-on or whatever, those days are gone. If you're going to commit your time and effort and be serious about this, it's now going to matter. Absolutely. So with that, I think now you're going to hear some great examples about how faculty have used this in the tenure and promotion materials. And I also want to say how excited I am to see old friends out there and statewide because in fact, I think long ago, there were faculty role statements in the statewide system that had a section about community service and community engagement. It was much more fleshed out. I think that's been revised over the years, but I think that existed for some time. So I know my statewide colleagues do very amazing things in this realm. So with that, I'll turn it over.
Awesome. Larry, thank you. I'm excited to hear your framing of that, and also so grateful for your support, Larry, over those years of getting us ready for Carnegie and for that process and for that designation. One thing that Kate and I learned, I'd say, so we reviewed our institutional application with John Saltmarsh, who is kind of the grandfather of the designation. And something that John said was how rare that frontier is still for universities. And so that really puts USU in another category of having it really explicit in tenure and promotion code. And, appreciate just like the emphatic underlining then, Larry, of how, this isn't, community engagement isn't just an add-on. It's not just a service aspect of the other pieces of your roles. It can really be a core element of how you demonstrate excellence as a faculty member. So I don't want to present, I want us to discuss, of course, but I did put together a handout, which hopefully y'all have one of these. You would like that one.
I think I have.
Oh, you got one. Okay. So I want to just jump to like the telling your story part, your community engaged story part. And share with you first, this is the 4 quadrants model. Has anybody heard of that model by chance? This is something I learned about from one of our former sociology colleagues, Maricela, who this was, I think, put out in 2019. This is really geared towards social sciences, but I think that it can be applicable across disciplines. The document that Sage put together has many ways of measuring impact, but this one in particular is geared toward thinking about like a fuller framework of how we can articulate what our impact is. First is academic. This is something that's, like pretty easy for us as academics to understand. Has the work that you've done advanced knowledge in the world? There's a lot of indicators and metrics that we're aware of for what the academic kind of impact looks like, right? Probably the clearest and most easy one to identify is like publications, like venue that you're publishing in, impact factor, right? Like there's all of these metrics that would show your excellence in an academic impact way. Another one though that is less thought of is practitioner impact, okay? So has the work that you've done led to an improvement in how other researchers are able to conduct their work? It might be creating new research methods or building tools that get adopted or creating data sets that get used, et cetera. There's another domain is the societal quadrant. So has the work that you've done actually led to changes in society? And that sounds grandiose, right? We might think of like, society on this policy, regulation, legislation, and that again could be at this large scale, federal level, state level, local level, even agency or organizational level kinds of policy, right? And then the 4th quadrant is the public one, and has the work then changed what the public's understanding is? And in contrast to the societal change, this would be changes in like public debate around an issue or public engagement and outreach activities, maybe changes to the spread and nature of information and networks, right? So I like this. I've seen this quadrant model used recently in people's self-assessments, in people's research statements. And I think it's a really nice framework to kind of, you could think creatively about like, how would I put the different impacts of my work in even like a figure, right? Some sort of depiction to show that your work that maybe had an academic paper come out of it also had a dozen more impact, right? That were previously not articulated and looked like that one paper, was all that was being recognized, right? So I'll pause there, like any thoughts or discussion about the quadrant model? And that's, I want to be clear, speaking, this is really, I think the quadrant models has more of a research focus to it, but I think, we could think of it from a teaching perspective as well. Well, let's talk about measuring community impact then. This is a a table that's adapted from a piece by Holland. So just like I mentioned earlier, the academic impact is really pretty easily understood. We get that. We understand, we would know what kind of metrics to use. I can tell you from my community engaged work, I have gotten better over the years at actually tracking things that I'm doing, but it's still, in some ways, it's just, there's not like a really great, there's not convention necessarily around how folks are tracking the impact of their community engagement. And so here are some examples, and I know we've got a few folks from Extension, both on Zoom, and I don't think anybody in here said that they have, yeah, Dave, that's right, Extension roles. So that some of this is going to be really familiar, I think, to our Extension folks. But you can think about what types of variables you might be trying to measure over time and what those would look like, again, as a accumulation of your impact from, year 1 to year 6, or from, tenure to your promotion to full. And it might just be like participation, things like as simple as the number of people who participated in events or work that you've facilitated, the hours that people have participated, the types of participation, the kind of roles that they had in your work. Student learning is a major kind of bucket that you'll want to think about. And I'd love to hear from the whole group about how folks have assessed the impact of community engagement on student learning. I've done a few different things. I'll sometimes analyze reflective essays from students. I've done quantitative, surveys, pre's and posts for students. I think sometimes I'll even, you can even think too of communications that you get from students later when they're in the field or practicing or working. Sometimes you'll get those kinds of notes back from students about the impact of that community engaged project they were in, right? Things like that. But what have others done to assess or measure the impact of community engagement on student learning that the whole group might benefit from hearing about?
And the things you just described.
Right.
I mean, a student writing you back, say 6 months, a year after graduation, and they're in full-time, professional employment, and they're saying, "Holy cow, this really was very helpful," or they've gone on to grad school, and we've had a number of our students say this, that the preparation through community engaged experiences in that they acquired, so presentation and participation in working with clients, if you will, but the public and perhaps elected officials or whatever, their colleagues in their graduate program haven't had that experience, and so they immediately see the value of it, and it elevates them significantly in their ability and their leadership and so forth in those programs. So it's anecdotal, but it's really valuable in my opinion, because it substantiates, is one way of substantiating what we do.
Yeah, I think the way that we settled on putting that language in the code under teaching was around high impact teaching practices. Is that right, Larry? And
right.
That was really intentional, because we were thinking about, there are numerous other high impact teaching practices, of course, but so then it kind of opens the door up to being able to name those in your dossier. But I think that another thing to maybe think about kind of incorporating somehow into either your teaching statement or philosophy or your portfolio, your teaching portfolio, would be, and we all know, those of us who teach CEL courses, and especially when it's an intensive project and there are multiple partners and just a lot happening, the preparation for that takes quite some time, right?
Yeah.
Because you're building a partnership. And the thing's going to fall on its face if there's not a strong partnership there, right? So are there ways too that you could think about, like, are there metrics for, your self-assessment letters, or your, for your, again, like I said, your teaching portfolio that would be useful to track, to demonstrate, like, this is a kind of effort that I'm putting into this thing that's a really high impact practice for my students. So here's the effort metrics, and then here's the outcomes of, what students are gaining too, right, on the other side. Other thoughts, or anybody on, it looks like Robbie, you have your hand up?
Yeah, this goes back to the quadrant model that you were talking about. I guess one of the challenges I've run into is kind of at least a perceived tension between the academic and the public, or the other aspects of it, where, if I have a situation where someone coming up for tenure or for promotion has chosen to not publish something with a top tier journal in order to reach something, to publish in a venue that would have broader reach and impact in the communities that they want to reach. How do you work through that tension? Or if I've got a faculty member debating what venue to use, where there might be a perceived tension between the academic side and the public access side of things, do I just encourage them to, and then myself explain what those choices were in my letter, and encourage them to do so in their letter, and that this was a conscious choice for community engaged learning? Or are there other tips that you might have? I'm quite new to this whole area, and so I'd appreciate any help in terms of thinking through, if not real tensions, at least perceived tensions there.
My first thought is, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that too, Larry, is that it would be helpful advice to faculty members to have a diversified body of work, right? And when it really matters, and it should always matter, that I think that the broadness of your reach and the community impact of your work, right? But when you're really invested in that, then that would be important to know. Like I know in my materials, I'll write about the importance of having a practitioner reach. I'm a social worker. And so publishing in and our National Association of Social Work journal that's going to have a practitioner readership means something different than it would in a top tier behind a paywall journal, right? And so I think if you can articulate that, and the motivations and reasons for that in a succinct way, it doesn't have to be long thing, but in a succinct way that makes sense, then that further, to me, it underscores just a dual impact of I'm making an traditional academic impact, and also a broader professional or public kind of impact. But I don't know, what do you think, Larry?
Well, I think when you try to tell the story about your community engaged learning activity, or community engaged research activity, I think you want to have balance. I think Jessica would adjust what you were saying is that like your retirement portfolio, you want diversity, right? And so I don't think that the choice is entirely yours. I mean, I think you'll be getting advice every year from your committee and your department head. And so I think you're going to have resources and other important folks who, can kind of help you make choices about the diversity of the activities you're doing in your areas of responsibility. I also think that what certain levels of review look for in dossiers, I'm thinking about the Central Committee here. We want to make sure that as a USU faculty member, you're making valuable contributions to your field. all right? And there can be lots of ways for you to make those contributions. Again, I think it'll be up to you as well as your committee and department head to tell the story issue. You know, I can think of dossiers where folks have done quite a bit of publishing, for example, not in academic journals, but in more popular venues. And I mean, maybe that's the trade-off. I mean, you could you know, do some work that's publishable in a very narrow, specific professional journal, small reach, or publish an op-ed in the New York Times and, you know, affect hundreds of millions or tens of millions. So, you know, again, you want to tell that story. And so I think it's okay, but I would strive for balance. I would strive for balance and listen to the folks who are going to be reading your dossier and seek their advice.
That's very helpful, Jess and Larry. Thank you both. I'll just add one little thing, which is to say, and in terms of people reading the dossier, I think what you said underscores for me the fact that it's really important for the department head to specify our focus on community engaged learning to the external reviewers as well, because they may be coming at this, since as it has been said earlier, USU is kind of groundbreaking in this area. They may be coming at this from a much more traditional sort of approach to looking at a dossier, and you know, making remarks about how this journal, it could have been this journal, but it's this one. That those sorts of remarks can be very unhelpful if they're not aware of the motivations behind publishing in certain venues or making certain choices. And so I think that letter that goes out from the department head to the external reviewers, I think it becomes crucial in relevant cases to articulate the CEL priorities that we share here at USU.
I love that comment, Robbie. Thank you for that. Yeah, I guess, you know, we're still in that student learning place, but are there any other thoughts or discussion that any folks want to share in that piece of community impact, what you're doing to measure student outcomes, how you're kind of framing it, how you're telling the story of the impact of community engagement for your students?
It's sort of related, Jess, but there are multiple ways in which you can approach it, engaging, right? And mentoring students, collaborative faculty student projects, if you will, you know, in addition to CEL courses, but you know, you're working with an individual grad student, for instance, or you're working with a bunch of undergrad students on a specific project where you're kind of, maybe they even have the idea or something, you're collaborating with them or advising them or something. There are different ways to approach it. They can then be evaluated and measured as well differently if the grad student passes his or her dissertation or thesis or whatever.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Dave. And I think there's something that you'll see often, I think, with community engaged scholars and teachers is like a blending across areas of the role too, right? The impacts kind of are like dominoes, from research to teaching and back, and then, you know, into service too. And so finding a way to tell that, I think, kind of more artfully in your dossier is helpful. One thing that I don't know, I mean, on agency impact, I mean, we could kind of get here, or impact on community served. But one thing that I think is a really, it's the last bullet point under agency impact is partners' estimation of benefit or impact. on the activity or on the community. And that's something I think we're often measuring student learning outcomes, but we're much less often actually measuring our partnership, both like the quality and strength of the partnership or the partner's perception of the benefit and the impact in their agency, in their organization, in their community, right?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, because some of the times when my students have picked like certain charities to put $1,000 towards, like certain charities will tell you you can save a life for about this much, right? So I don't know if that would count as a community impact or saying something like that. It's like this money, this is what this is how many lives you're going to save by donating this amount of money to our cause and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, that's like a really tidy impact thing you've already got in right there, right? I think so. We're kind of two hats sometimes in the community where I've been in the space of being the community partner and engaging with university folk. And then I've been the university faculty member engaging with the community partner. And, I can say from both perspectives, as a faculty person, you can understand like the range of quality of especially when you're working with students, is going to vary, and you're going to see really fantastic projects happen and outcomes from those projects. You're going to see some crash and burn and not be maybe quite as helpful to the organization or to the partner. And I think it's just really important. Now I'm getting a little bit now on a soapbox and not on the focus of what we're talking about today, but it's really important to like stay centered as a community engaged faculty person who's leading students and research in the community. Stay centered on like what the purpose is, and that's that greater good and that like impact for the community. And so now to connect it back, the question is like the challenges for us is to make sure that we're measuring that and that we can tell that story. And so I wonder if folks have ideas or things that have worked for them about how we measure that partner impact. And what that might look like in our dossiers.
So in more than one time, our work has served communities, small towns or cities or districts to apply for a grant, for example, a community grant or a federal grant, and that brings them, and they take the students' work and just put a cover and send it. And it's not that we're preparing that for them, but the work is of good quality or quality good enough to support their request. And we don't always know what they do with the work that we provide them with, but
that'd be a powerful metric.
That time thing is a challenge, because at least in our line of work, it can take years and years for things to evolve. And I think that's part of the story. I said that in my dossier materials, is that, obviously it's something that's constantly evolving, but giving examples like Carlos said, and certainly in my opinion, the thing that is really, really important is establishing a sound working relationship with the partner, with the stakeholder, because we can't just fly in there and do our thing and leave. It has to be something that's longstanding. So from a selfish perspective, you can go back to that partner and say, how did we help you? And they'll tell you straight up that it's going to be a good thing, right? I incorporated a lot of those kinds of statements and that feedback into my material.
Yeah, I love that, Dave. And I'm even thinking, I've had projects crash and burn with students, right? And that feedback loop is so important for your own like process improvement, but also again, keep like staying in the realm of
partner what you could do better.
Yeah, what you could do better. And then how do you integrate in that in your teaching statement, and that you have this way of like this feedback loop from partnered back to classroom and improvements, in the impacts over time.
We took their advice and that didn't work.
Yeah, that happens too. Yeah. I think another like just a qualitative piece of information is community partner letters or community partner kind of almost like blurbs about impact, those can be integrated, I think, in a dossier in a really artful way too, is like an illustrative example.
So a letter, what kind of letter?
So you might, a faculty member might ask if a project, and sometimes you might have a multi-year project. Sometimes they might be, a 1 year or one-off kind of project. You could have, I think, a like what you're talking about, Dave, of like some mechanism that you built into your practice of getting feedback on the impact of the project.
Okay. So a letter describing that.
Yeah, describing that.
If you get more sophisticated about it, you can have a pre-project, how much do you know about this kind of thing? And then follow up and then say, now what do you know? And by the way, how much did we help you, in advancing, whatever it is that you want to do.
I think I was going to ask, so at JEP, they often had, I think, partners even do some assessment of students and occasionally write letters about, so there was like an interview that they would offer, like an exit interview that the student would do with the community partner. So I wonder, that seems like it could sort of do both. Like it could serve as depending on how you run it, it could be a kind of, it might be a more measurable metric. How many students are we turning out that are getting sort of positive reviews from their community partner, and then like how does the partner sort of assess the impact of the student at their whatever it is that they're doing.
That's a great idea. I hope I can access that in my files.
Yeah,
in like a month when I'm writing a syllabus.
I think it would be. I think it's like it's the kind of thing that only evolves after a long, healthy kind of partnership, right? Like it's a lot to ask of someone who's helping you pilot like a new thing, but
right.
Yeah.
Well, and I appreciate you bringing that up too, is like the mindfulness of both what we're asking and the burdens we're putting on communities and partners, and and that's another thing I think to stay centered on as community engaged teachers and scholars, for sure. A few more bullet points that, we're getting close to time, so I'll just wrap up on this last section and then I'll turn it back to Kate. So we think of agency or organizational kind of impact here, and then more broadly on the communities that you're serving. So these can be simple kind of like metrics, like the number of community members that were served or have been served by the partners that were facilitating whatever the project was. Qualitative feedback or quantitative kind of feedback. You might think about a case study, and that I think case studies are really powerful, and I encourage folks to think about also writing those up into an article, because of those multi-year projects. You don't necessarily know which way you're going to end in 4 years when you start engaging with a partner back here, right? But that could be a really fantastic case study that could be written up or depicted just in your materials more broadly, right? But that could denote the community impact. You also might think about like the feedback that you can get from the constituents or the community members who ideas that the group would want to share related to this or otherwise about what's been helpful for you in writing up your own community engagement story, or questions that you have about, ideas that are brewing. This is a great opportunity with a lot of community engaged folks in the room.
It should show up in all of your areas.
Yeah, they do. Our Zoomers hear that. It should really show up in all of your areas if this is a really core part of your identity. And even if it's like an ancillary part of it, right? That's okay too. It can be one piece of how you're demonstrating excellence in your role.
I'd just like to interject that I really appreciate your providing this framework. I've been doing my clean air contest for this is the 8th year, and to be very candid with you, the Huntsman School really doesn't see much value in it, and so this will help me in a way to kind of position it to show how this allows us to engage with high school kids. One challenge I will say is that to get feedback from the high school kids on its impact has been challenging because IRB makes it very difficult to collect data from high school kids. I have to get the parents' authorization, and so just data collection has been very challenging. But I will say that Rosalind and I have gotten 4 published articles out of this work during that time. So we do have documentation as to what's the impact it has had on high school kids. And actually, I'm really excited because 2 of my winners from 2020 are actually marketing majors now in the Huntsman School. So I don't know if I can take credit for bringing them in there, but at least they're going to be taking my class in the next year. So it's kind of fun. But again, I really appreciate your showing this. And then what I do like, because I do chair a lot of P&T committees, and there is not a lot of community engagement type things coming out of the Huntsman School. And so I think this will provide some substance in code where they can say that, okay, if I do engage in some kind of a process like this, that I can take credit for it. Because I've had a challenge as to how do I set this up. I do collect data, I do research based on my outreach, but I do frame the outreach as part of my teaching. And so, and I've been doing that for almost my whole 30 years here at Utah State. When I worked in wind power, my colleague and I, we would literally go from community to community talking about how wind would create all these jobs and types of impacts. And so we've been doing community outreach for a long time in our work, but there wasn't any way to position it, I would say, for credit, for promotion and tenure. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Ed. Thank you for sharing that. And I'll make sure, I'll get the full list from Nelda, and I'll make sure to send out the full document so that you all have the 4-quadrant model and then also the Holland piece. You've got a handout, but I'll make sure that you have the original source too, in case you'd like to use that as a framework. So
I'm glad Ed spoke up. I was going to call on you, Ed, to share your experiences. Ed documented his community engagement by making a documentary film.
Yes.
That, did you win an Oscar or something like that?
No, that wasn't an Oscar. We got a Mountain Film Festival award. So it was an obscure film festival somewhere in California.
Oscar of the Rockies.
the Oscar of the Rockies. Carlos says. Oh, that's great. You want to close this up, Kate?
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows about the Center for Community Engagement and utilizes us as a resource. Nelda has recently shifted her position to be the Assistant Director for Community Engaged Learning, and a lot of her job is putting together partnerships. So identifying faculty who have interests in certain areas or teaching a class with learning outcomes that could match community identified needs. So she's out there in the community talking to people and finding out what those high priority needs are in our community. And then we're matching them with faculty interests. So please reach out to us and help us help you. And then I also wanted to mention, we were talking about how do we measure partner impact, and something also that our office can do is if y'all are using community partners who we have formal relationships with, we'll do regular surveys of those partners, and we can then share that with you. So that could take some of the burden off of you in terms of those numbers. And then we're also working to develop a P&T report form that's kind of similar to honors. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. But that too can be used to lighten your load, and we'll put that together for you. And we're working on that as we speak. So hopefully we'll be able to roll that out pretty quick. And then finally, we're working with Larry to develop a faculty fellows program, and we haven't fully fleshed that out yet, But if you or any of your colleagues might be interested in taking part in a faculty fellowship, then please follow up and let us know. The what? Oh, no, go ahead. What did you have in mind in particular? Oh, like the book.
Can I just ask what the faculty fellowship is real quick?
Yeah, so so I might be speaking too soon, but Jess and I have talked a little bit with Larry about this. But the fellowship would, some of the responsibilities that individual or individuals would have would be to co-chair our community engagement faculty subcommittee, promote the designation across colleges and departments, do things like write a monthly faculty spotlight on community engagement, promote our community engaged department program, help us develop this P&T form that can be available to faculty, mentoring new faculty on CEL pedagogy, and strengthening faculty supports for high quality community engagement.
I've also wanted to say, just for those of you who are involved with ETE, community engagement is now, I think it was announced last week by Shelley Arnold, is a master teaching certificate that you can work towards within ETE. So there will be some Spark shops that are happening this year. Nelda will be leading a learning circle on a book next semester. So there'll be some opportunities, I think, this is exciting to have this many folks in physically here and in Zoom who are invested in community engagement. And we just want to see that community grow and strengthen at USU. So I think ETE will be a good opportunity to see that happen. Thanks, everybody.
Did you want to add anything?
Sam had his hand raised, but now it doesn't, so. Just looking at the time. Sam, did you have a question or?
I did, and then I saw the time, but it was a really quick question. We did my first community engagement course was in the spring, and we thought it was successful here in Blanding, and we think it has application statewide, but I don't have the bandwidth to negotiate with the different, we did it in prison here, and I thought we could do it in every prison if only there was someone willing to help us with the negotiating and see who is willing. So I don't know if that's part of what you can help us with as a center, where we think the chance of most of them saying yes is high because it's free textbook in prison to help them gain access to college education. So if that's possible, I could use a little help so we can spread the joy. And I even see that happening nationally. So I wanted to just reach out and see if you want to help us.
Yeah, we'll be in touch. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.